Hi, it's Laura at Aquamarine18. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. Welcome or welcome back. This is my recap video for June 2021. So as always, I'll have some kind of general life updates and I'll talk about the decks that I've received new to me this month, decks I've been working with a lot this month, the books that I've finished this month, and there are quite a lot of those again, and the animal card that I've been exploring this month as well. And at the end, I will choose a new animal for July, and I will pick some TBR cards to choose some books for July. And as always, I'll timestamp things below. So, general life updates. I'm filming this on what has been the hottest day of the year so far. I'm not on the West Coast, so I'm not in that really, really hot weather time, but it is a very hot day today, so I'm very shiny. And the fact that I am so warm today and also so shiny today means that one of my favorite highlights of the entire month is that I have booked a haircut, the first haircut that I've been allowed to have in many, many months, hence having more hair than I've had in a very long time. Things are slowly reopening where I am, so I will be able to get a haircut in mid-July, and I'm so excited. Other life updates. I have mentioned in my previous discussion for last month, for May, that I was taking a class, the Elements of Magic, which is a core class in Reclaiming Tradition Witchcraft. It was based with Reclaiming Pittsburgh, but of course it was on Zoom this time. And so this month, one of my highlights is that I finished the class. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad that I took it. I learned a lot. And alongside that class, I have been reading Elements of Magic, Reclaiming Earth, Air, Fire, Water, Spirit, edited by Jane Meredith and Gade Parma. I've mentioned this anthology before as well, but this anthology is organized much in the way that the class was. So there is a section for each of the elements, and in Reclaiming Spirit is conceptualized as an element. So those 5 elements, and then some introductory material as well. And in the class that I took, we had a week each for those 5 elements, as well as an introductory week. So this was a really nice companion to the course. Really good. And I recommend this book whether you are a Reclaiming Tradition practitioner or not. If you have a practice that kind of makes use of elemental associations, there's probably something for you in here. I thought that it was really good. So that was a highlight because this book has been on my book stack of joy for quite some time as I waited to get the opportunity to take the class. So this is an accomplishment as well, finishing that class. Really enjoyed it. The other big life update, which I'm actually not going to spend too much time talking about in this video because I want to make another video that will talk more about this, is that I have begun pursuing a journey in Druidry. I haven't talked about this yet on my channel. I plan to do a kind of mid-year 6-month check-in around some of the intentions for 2021 that I set, my 2021 word and sigil that I've shared before. And so I'm going to talk about this a lot more in that video, which will be coming up very soon. But yeah, I've been reading a lot about Druidry, 3 books and counting so far, and talking to some folks who have been pursuing Druid paths of various sorts, for years. And I've been learning a lot about it, and I've found that I want to pursue that. So it's been a big shift in some ways and not a shift at all in others. It's the first time that I've ever felt really inclined towards pursuing anything as organized as this, anything as kind of clearly defined and delineated as Druidry, but I'm really really excited about it. So I will be again sharing more about that. You know, it's very, very new to me, but it feels really good. I'm really happy. And so, yeah, I'll have lots to say about my beginnings of my Druid journey at a later time. You know, probably in a week or so, I'll have that video up. But for the time being, that has been a big shift for me in the past month and a bit, orienting myself towards what Druidry might bring to my practice, what my practice in the context of Druidry might look like. Lots of journaling, lots of exploring, lots of reading, lots of discussion. So I'm really, really excited, and I will share more about that in due course, but this is just the monthly highlights, so I'll leave it there. So moving on from the general highlights to new decks that I've received this month. There are 2 decks that I have received this month. One of those I've already shared with you all in a dedicated review, and that one is the Sapphic Enchantress Tarot deck designed by Aishamira Yashin, and this is a DIY, currently majors only, but full deck in the works deck that is very feminist, you know, very LGBTQ plus centric. Amazing deck that I've been enjoying. I have never had a majors only deck before, so I've been working with this in new ways that have expanded my tarot practice in some sense. Having some spread positions, for example, that specifically call for a major arcana card. So I draw from this deck and then have another deck shuffled with the minors to pick from for other spread positions, all kinds of things. So this is a great deck. And this deck was sent to me as a gift by my dear friend Liz at West Star Tarot. And so major thanks to Liz. I love it. I love this deck. You can watch my review of this deck. I'll link it below. Fantastic. Fantastic deck. The other deck that I received this month that was new to me was a long-awaited one. And a gift for myself, from myself to myself for Pride Month, this month. And that is the Fifth Spirit Tarot by Charlie Claire Burgess. I had decided that I really wanted to add this deck to my collection, and then I couldn't because they were not shipping to Canada, where I am. So I went to order it, not realizing that Charlie had stopped shipping to Canada. There had been some international shipping issues. So I waited. I did talk to them, and they said that they were planning to ship to Canada again once those issues were sorted out. And I was glad to be able to get this and to get the book as well. There were some other stockists of this deck that I could have ordered just the deck from, but I wanted to wait so that I could get the deck and the book together. And a lot of the other shops that were selling the deck didn't necessarily have the book, or they were, you know, international shops that it would have cost way more for me. So I waited, and I received this Fifth Spirit Tarot, and it is everything that I had wanted it to be. I have started reading the book, and so far I have nothing but glowing positive compliments for the guidebook for this deck, both as a guidebook for this deck and just a guidebook in general, a book about tarot in general. I really like this deck because the minors are quite pippish in a way. There's definitely nods to Smith-Waite, but it's not really a Smith-Waite deck in my mind. I love it for its queer centering. I love it for its diversity. I love the cardstock, which actually I have to say, I was skeptical about this cardstock before I had bought it because I thought in watching videos of the deck and reading the specs, I thought that it looked like it would be too thin for me. Thin cardstock makes me nervous. I'm not gentle with things. So I was a bit nervous about that, but the cardstock is fantastic. It shuffles beautifully. It is a linen cardstock. I'm sure, you know, folks have seen these cards before, but I'm very, very happy to have the Fifth Spirit Tarot. Oh, the box is not cooperating. There we go. The Fifth Spirit Tarot by Charlie Claire Burgess in my collection. I feel like it's been a long time coming, and, you know, with things still not really running right now where I am, not having in-person Pride festivities to go to, you know, this is now the second year of feeling really disconnected in ways that have been not always easy, and decks like this have been really supportive in that context. So I'm happy to have received that deck as well. Other decks that I've been working the most with in this month, besides the two that I just showed, which I've had on my table consistently and worked a lot with, the other decks that I've worked with the most, probably the one that stands out in my mind and the one that I've worked with the most is Hoodoo Tarot. And I've shown the Hoodoo Tarot before. It is a deck that I have quickly really come to love. And I've been participating in the Hoodoo Tarot study hosted by Kim at Abundant Life Tarot. I'm not on Facebook, so I've been missing out on that aspect of the tarot study group. I'm sure there's lots of great discussion going on there. But, you know, I'm not a Facebook user, so I can't see that. But I've been posting the odd time on Instagram. Not every day, but I have kept up with my daily draws with this deck, and I've done the spreads that Kim has provided each week with this deck and journaling questions and so on. I have a card that has been really insistent for me, which is Dr. Grant, who is the Hermit in this deck. He's been showing up really, really persistently, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in my 6-month kind of yearly intentions check-in, spiritual shifts kind of video that I'm going to make very soon. But this deck has really been special to work with. I've never had a deck before that has given me so many major arcana cards in all the readings that I've been doing. And, you know, it's like big messages, big things to say, and so many repetitions as well. Like, I've even had to check. I'm like, is this one card bigger than all the others or something? Like, why does it keep popping out for me? But no, it's not that. And there's Dr. Grant here. Has shown up so many times for me, and has really been important for me this month. I ended up going and reading an interview with Dr. Grant, which was conducted by Zora Neale Hurston. Zora Neale Hurston wrote a issue of the Journal of American Folklore, I believe it is called, in the early 1930s, and interviews a number of practitioners of hoodoo, and one of those is Dr. Grant. So I got that issue of the journal and read that, or read most of it, including the interview with Dr. Grant, and I've been reading some other sources. The guidebook for this deck is fantastic, but I've wanted to read some other sources as well, so I've been doing that, and these daily draws have been really wonderful, really great deck to work with, and I've really been enjoying Kim's prompts, and I've made it to a couple of the lives. I feel like I very rarely wish that I was on Facebook. Like, I have no desire to be on Facebook, but for this deck study, I do kind of feel like I'm missing it a bit, but I'm really enjoying working with the deck and the prompts and discussing on YouTube and Instagram. So that's been really wonderful. I also made a little dedicated notebook for the Hoodoo Tarot study, or for the Hoodoo Tarot. So I got this small notebook, and it has some floral detailing on there, which is actually from the Taj Mahal. And I've just been keeping track of readings I've done. I've been taking some notes from Kim's videos on the different majors. and I've kept track of which cards I've gotten in my daily draws. I use my big journal that I journal in daily to actually kind of write through things, but I'm keeping track of them in here. So that's been really good. Other decks I have used, I've really been enjoying, to I'm sure no surprise, the Page of Cats Tarot. Page of Cats Tarot by Tina at Queen of Wands. And this deck is just great. This cat looks exactly like my best friend's cat. My best friend recently adopted a kitten and named the kitten Mavis, and this one looks like Mavis. And this one looks like my neighbor's cat. So this deck has been really fun. Adorable and endearing, and a cuddle of a deck if I ever saw one. I've also been working with Tina's Naturescapes Tarot as well. I currently have it laid out in a spread upstairs though, so I didn't actually bring it for this video. And finally, the last tarot deck that I have been working with this month that is going to go all over the place. This is the Rose deck, and this is by Colin of Story Moon Divination. It is not for sale, so please don't go bug him. It's prototype, but this is a pip deck, which is very colorful, color-coded for the different suits. And this is a deck that I've just really been enjoying. I find the splashes of color to be quite summery, though it's also certainly I feel like it's a seasonless deck. You know, it doesn't feel seasonal in that sense, but it feels really summery to me right now. So I've been really drawn to work with that deck as well, and I usually like to have out on my table, excuse me, at least one pip deck. If I'm also working with more Smith-Waite or more abstract decks, I always like to have a couple of different kind of systems represented, so this has been the one that I've gone for in that respect. Going on to books that I've read this month, I have read 13 books in June. I had set a goal at the beginning of the calendar year 2021, kind of a New Year's resolution, I guess, to read at least 100 books this year. And the reason I did that is because I read 99 books in 2020. So I should have read 50 books by now since we're halfway through the year, but I've actually read 60, so I'm ahead, which is good because when the school year rolls around, I'll inevitably slow down. But anyway, I've read 13 books in June. I'm very happy with that. But of the 13, I only really want to discuss 9 at length here, at any length here anyway. So first, the 4 that I won't be discussing too much. One is this Elements anthology, which I've talked about several times. My friend Cara over at CuteWitch772 has a really good review of this book. I may do a review of this book too. I'm not sure yet if folks are interested in that, but I would maybe do a review of this book, but I feel like I've talked about it enough. I also read in June 2 books on Druidry. One was Philip Cargom's Druid Mysteries, and the other was the Druidry Handbook, which is written by John Michael Greer, who, if you'll remember, is also the author of a geomancy book that I've talked about on this channel previously. So I read those 2 Druidry books. I learned a lot and got a lot out of both of them. They're very different books, but I liked them both. But I'll talk about the Druidry reading a little bit more in my 6 months into 2021, what is my updates for that, and my kind of recent spiritual journey and my shift towards Druidry. I'll talk about those books in this later video, so I'll leave those to the side for now. And finally, the last one that I'm not going to talk about too much in this update is the Outside the Charmed Circle, Exploring Gender and Sexuality in Magical Practice. And this one I have already filmed a in-depth review for, so you can find that linked below. I filmed it fairly recently, easy to find on my channel. I loved this book. If you have any interest in the topic whatsoever, do pick this book up. It's really, really excellent. I highly recommend it. So check out my review if you're interested as well. I will mention before I put this one aside that one of my TBR cards for June was to pick a book that matches your current outfit. And I laughed at this one because I was like, what am I going to pick for that? But this ended up being the book that I chose for a book matching my current outfit. The shirt that I was wearing at the time I chose it was this one. So it's kind of maroon and white. And so I thought that goes well enough. I'm going to count it and read something off of the book stack that I already have. So that was this book. Really enjoyed it. So going on to the other 9 books that I read this month. I had the card Filial, Own Voices book centering a Muslim family. And for this one, I chose a book on my e-reader, so I don't have it to show you, called You Exist Too Much by Zaina Arafat. And You Exist Too Much follows a bisexual Palestinian-American woman and, a series of events in her life. And I chose this, of course, in part because with it being Pride Month, I was, even more determined to find bisexual representation than I usually am, which is also significant. So I was really happy to read this one as a Own Voices book by a bisexual Palestinian Muslim American woman, Zaina Arafat. And the book really follows the narrator specifically. It's really a story about one person, but in terms of centering a Muslim family, a major theme of You Exist Too Much has to do with the narrator's relationship with her mother, especially her family more broadly, and there are portions of flashbacks to her childhood with her family and things like this, but really in particular with her mother, and including trying to come out to her mother and introduce her mother to a partner, and the kinds of different outlooks on life between herself and her mother that are partly cultural, partly generational, navigating these kinds of differences. So I really enjoyed You Exist Too Much by Zaina Arafat for this prompt. The last prompt I had was Get Graphic, Own Voices book or graphic novel with a neurodiverse protagonist. Now, I don't really read graphic novels. I've read one, ever, and that was George Takei's book. So I just went with a book for this one. And the book I chose was Akwaeke Emezi's Freshwater. I had wanted to read this book since it came out, but the content warnings were such that when it came out, I didn't think it would be a great idea for me to read that book. And I was right. I'm glad that I waited. The content warnings on Freshwater are absolutely warranted. In terms of the subject matter, it is a difficult book to get through, for sure. But I am so glad I read it because it was genius. And I now want to read everything that Akwaeke Emezi has written. If you're unfamiliar with Akwaeke Emezi, they are a Nigerian, Igbo, and Tamil non-binary author who I have seen describe themselves using the language of neurodiverse or neurodivergent. So that's why, I put it for this card. And amazing. I've never read anything like Freshwater. It's a very hard book to describe, but do check out the description for Freshwater by Akwaeke Emezi, and if it sounds interesting or something that you would want to read, I gave it 5 stars. I can't recommend it enough, though, with the caveat that the content warnings on that book are absolutely, absolutely warranted, and it is a difficult read. So I wanted to share a little quote from an interview with Akwaeke Emezi that I read. I'll link the interview in full below, but with reference to Freshwater and thinking about neurodiverse protagonists and neurodivergence represented in Freshwater, Akwaeke Emezi writes, quote, "I'd been trying to understand suicidality, and Western lenses that were around mental health really weren't helpful. And the only thing that sticks for me was going back and choosing a different lens. And Obanje was the one that made a lot more sense than the mental health descriptions of what was going on." end quote. So Obanje is a mythological kinds of spirit in Igbo lore, I guess, and so this is a core part of the book Freshwater, and Freshwater is beautifully written. I highlighted, I feel like I highlighted half of the book, honestly, but a very difficult read, but incredible, profound. It doesn't read like a debut novel, but it is one. I feel emotional discussing Freshwater. It was so good. And Akwaeke Emezi has a memoir out that's come out this past month, I think, and I'm going to buy it. And I'm going to read it too. And then I'm going to read their other books. I think there are 2 others, because Akwaeke Emezi has affected me tremendously reading Freshwater. And I just want to read everything they've written now. So that was the 3rd and final TBR card that I had picked for this month. Speaking of the TBR cards, though, Jessie of Bowties and Books YouTube channel, who makes these TBR cards, had a short weekend-long readathon for June, and that was Queer Blackathon, and it was a weekend of reading to us LGBTQ plus Black authors and books, and there were a couple of suggested prompts, but kind of entirely optionally, just with the idea that the focus would be reading to us LGBTQ plus Black authors and books. So I did read some things that fit some of the prompts for that one. And there was a live chat and some other things. I'll link the announcement video below that just summarizes the readathon. But the group book for that one, the book suggested for anyone who wanted to participate to read this month, happened to be one of my very much anticipated new releases for 2021, and that was Sorrowland by Rivers Solomon. Rivers Solomon is a non-binary queer author. They wrote An Unkindness of Ghosts, which I've talked about on this channel before, and The Deep. I've read both of those books and really liked both of those books, so their next book was high on my list, and so, you know, Jessie picking it for the Queer Blackathon just kind of nudged me a little bit to actually get it on my e-reader and read it. And so this was one of the most recent books I've read, actually. Sorrowland. It is a horror, very much so a horror, and a science fiction book as well in terms of some of the elements, but I would say very predominantly horror. And Sorrowland deals with a lot of complex and very difficult themes in terms of racism, historical and contemporary, in terms of religious ideas and discrimination based on religious ideas, and gender and sexuality and many, many, many things. It was really, really good. Also a difficult read. I kept, when I was reading Sorrowland, just kind of saying to my partner when we're reading in bed, like, this is scary. This is so scary. It follows a very young protagonist, at least very young at the beginning of the book, mid-teens, who escapes from what is initially presented as possibly a kind of cult, but possibly not, but certainly a closed, a very strict community. And she gives birth alone in a forest very, very early in the book to twins. And then the book goes forward from there. The protagonist is intersex and queer, and I really liked Sorrowland a lot. I don't read as much horror as I read some other genres, but I really, really liked it. And Rivers Solomon, if you haven't read Rivers Solomon, their writing is just, I feel like I highlighted half the book, and I was highlighting things that spoke to me, and I was highlighting passages that were just so poetic and beautiful that I wanted them, that I wanted to highlight them so that I would keep them in my notes. And they're one of few authors that I can really say that I do that for. But River Solomon is an incredible writer, so if you haven't read them, check out their books as well. Next book I read was The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow. And this book I was reading with Corvin of Tailraven Tarot and Tailraven Reads and their book club. I'll link below to the video where they introduce their book club. You can find info about it through them or through their Tailraven Flock of Friends, I think it's called, Facebook group as well. But we had previously read another book by this author, and so we all liked it, so we chose this 10,000 Doors of January. And this is a portal fantasy, going through portals into different worlds and, traveling back and forth is the heart of this story, and the politics of opening and closing doors and claiming control of access through said doors is also a core part of this book. Highly recommend, 5-star read. Really, really enjoyed this. Alex E. Harrow is one of the definite favorite authors for me that I've discovered this year, who I've read for the first time this year. Really, really stand out. And I'm also having a lot of fun reading with Corvin and friends in the Tailraven book club. So if you would like to join us, get in touch with Corvin. We're currently reading The Conductors, a novel which is really good so far, but I'm not going to talk about it because I haven't finished it yet. But get in touch with Corvin if you would like to read with us. The next one I read was A Desolation Called Peace. A Desolation Called Peace is a sequel. It's by Arkady Martin to A Memory Called Empire. A Memory Called Empire won the Hugo Award for Best Novel last year. And A Desolation Called Peace was better, in my opinion. 5 stars. It was a good reading month. A Desolation Called Peace was excellent. This series deals with imperial politicking on a galactic scale, and is just the kind of wide-reaching space opera that I love. Lots of own voices, queer representation in this book, which is also fantastic. And I cannot wait for book 3 because there's going to be a book 3. I would recommend A Desolation Called Peace 100%. However, only if you've read A Memory Called Empire. This is a kind of sequel that you absolutely need to have read the first book first, or it will make no sense at all. So check out A Memory Called Empire if you haven't read that one, and you would be into a sweeping space opera. Brilliant. The next one that I read, and I want to share a little bit from the Kindle, is Love After the End, an anthology of Two-Spirit and Indigiqueer speculative fiction, edited by Joshua Whitehead. And June, besides being Pride Month, is also Indigenous History Month, and so I definitely wanted to have some reading that kind of met the intersection of those things. So this anthology, Love After the End, did that perfectly. And so it's a collection of, again, Two-Spirit and Indigiqueer speculative fiction, sci-fi and fantasy short stories. It's fairly short. I think there's 8 stories. I really, really liked this. I feel like anthologies of short stories tend to be quite uneven, but I really liked this collection overall. And I wanted to share a very brief paragraph from the introduction of Love After the End that speaks to something really important, I think. So this is Joshua Whitehead, the editor, talking about this collection. Originally, the project was designed to be geared towards the dystopic, and after careful considerations, we decided to queer it towards the utopian. This, in my opinion, was an important political shift in thinking about the temporalities of two-spirit, queer, trans, and non-binary Indigenous ways of being. For as we know, we have already survived the apocalypse. This right here, right now, is a dystopian present. what better way to imagine survivability than to think about how we may flourish into being joyously animated rather than being merely alive. And he goes on to talk about, some theoretical approaches to queer temporality and the power of utopian visioning and hopeful visioning. And so this was also really important to me. I feel like, thinking about reading in June and reading particularly twist LGBTQ plus books, with queer protagonists and queer authors, and also doing so diversely. So reading a lot of books by twist LGBTQ plus authors of color. It can be hard to even find joyful, utopian, happy books with endings that are not tragic, with any kind of just like a hopeful focus, right? That are not really, really, really focused on trauma. And so having this book was really good, I think, for that reason. And I think that it is important to have that representation as well. 3 books left. This is always the longest section of this videos. So I read, where can I put things? There we go. I read another novel, and this one I got in paperback. I've been trying to read solely on my Kindle for fiction. Producing a book takes a lot of water, if you didn't know, producing a hard copy book. But this one, this cover, I was just like, oh, I have to get this, this amazing cover, The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke. This is a new author to me, and a new series. So this is the first book in what will be a series that I am totally going to read all of. Really, really interesting fantasy series. Epic fantasy for sure. The setting and I guess like the world building in the book is very much inspired by Northern Africa and as well as European colonialism in Northern Africa. But it's also very much a fictional fantasy novel, focusing in particularly on resistance to colonial incursions and colonial authoritarianism in the book. So this was really good as well. I have a review up. I'll put my Goodreads link again. I've been reviewing on Goodreads. I've also been reviewing on Storygraph, which is a great newer book reviewing app and website. And so you can find me on Storygraph. I'll link below as well. Currently I'm reviewing on both. But if you go for epic, historically informed fantasy, this one would be a good choice for you. I just finished reading as well a book called Notes from the Burning Age by Claire North. Notes from the Burning Age is not out yet. I received an advance review copy from the publisher to give my thoughts before it comes out. But Notes from the Burning Age was really, really good. This is a post-apocalyptic novel based on people basically living after a massive human-caused climate catastrophe. It's a very timely book. And it follows a protagonist, Ven, whose job as a kind of monk in this society is looking through the remnants of human culture before the major climate disasters that happened, and kind of sorting that material based on whether it is kind of desirable to keep around as public information or not. So he's going through old hard drives and things like this. There's, a lot of cat pictures, a lot of porn, a lot of inter-office mail, and sorting through, what has been left behind by essentially people living as we do, and how those in the future are interpreting that information. And it deals with the kind of questions of whether humans can or humans will learn from some of what has happened and change the way that they're living accordingly, or will go back to exploiting the planet and living in completely unsustainable ways. So really, really good. My first book by Claire North, who has published prolifically under multiple pseudonyms. Very, very good. Definitely recommend. And finally, I just finished a novella. I read it yesterday, Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire, and this is a very highly rated book. Every Heart a Doorway is the first book in a lengthy series of novellas, but the novellas are very short. Like, again, I read one in an afternoon kind of thing. And it follows a home for wayward children, and these are children who had been through portals. So, who had found secret doors or secret entrances to fantastical worlds of various sorts, and then have come back. And so there's this school being run for these young people who range in age from maybe 12 to 18-ish. And it's essentially a murder mystery in terms of the plot, but that's the setting and the framework for it. I liked a lot about this. I like the way that this book sorts the different kinds of fantasy worlds into different categories. I liked the fact that there's an asexual protagonist, which is a rare moment of representation. And I know Seanan McGuire identifies as bisexual and demisexual as well. So it's an own voices representation too, which I think is really important. I felt like the pace was a little bit challenging because a novella is just short, right? So for a murder mystery to be stuck into 200 pages can be a little bit challenging. But I feel like what I thought was missing because of the short length may be made up for by the fact that it's a series. So I felt like there could have been a lot more character development, but also there just wasn't the page length for it. But with there being so many more novellas in the series, I imagine that will pick up. So I do plan on reading further into that novella series as well. That is all of my books. So with that, I am going to choose a couple of new cards for July. And I already have some books chosen for July, so I don't want to pick too many TBR cards this month. I'm going to pick 3 for July. And I've left out the 3 that I just read so that we get some variety. But other ones that I've read I have put back in, so. What 3 cards do I need to inspire my July reading? Okay. Card number 1. Ooh. Next level. Read a sequel. I have a couple of options for this. That'll be a good one. That's a good kind of kick in the butt to get to continuing series that I've started but not finished. Read a sequel. Throwback. Written prior to 2000. I think it's hilarious that throwback only goes back to 2000. That doesn't feel like a throwback to me, 1999, but you know. Throwback. I can do that. And number 3. Ooh. Write me. An epistolary novel. That one I'm going to have to think about. I know that Akwaeke Emezi's memoir that just came out is epistolary, but it is not a novel because it is a memoir. So I will have to think about an epistolary novel. Okay. My animal for the month of June that I worked with was the Atlas Bear. And this card is from The Flora and Fauna of Africa by Jessie Jumanji. The Atlas Bear is Ursus arctos. And the message here that goes with Atlas Bear: take charge. Use mental and physical strength to overcome adversity. Protect and cherish what you love. I was not familiar with the Atlas Bear until this month. And as it turns out, the Atlas Bear is extinct. I've never had an animal of the month that was extinct before. And in terms of confirmed sightings of the Atlas bear, which was a bear that was native to Northern Africa, the Atlas bear was extinct around the 1870s. So in terms of learning about the Atlas bear, this quite changed the process, right? Because usually when I have an animal of the month, I'll be doing things like watching YouTube videos of what that animal is doing, you know, and little mini documentaries, you know, 5 facts about the animal, things like this, that I can find, and learning about its behavior. But a lot about the Atlas bear's characteristics, I guess, you know, even its diet or how it behaved, are not really known because it went extinct in the 1870s. And it went extinct in the 1870s because in its outward expansion, the Roman Empire and Roman people, I guess, treated this bear extremely poorly. It was hunted, and not for sustenance. It was exploited. It was used in sport. Just all kinds of really horrifying things that were not in any way pleasant to read about. And so thinking about this message, you know, of using strength to overcome adversity and protecting and cherishing what you love, this month, the fact of this bear being extinct really kind of dominated my understanding. So I learned as much as I could about the Atlas bear, but again, it's quite limited. There weren't a whole bunch of YouTube videos about Atlas bear, for example. Though I did find some videos that feature things like size comparisons between different kinds of bears that would include this one. But it ended up leaving me with just a lot of thinking about our impacts as humans on other species, and thinking about ways in my life to try to mitigate my own negative impacts on the environment around me, which also aligns with Druidry as I'm exploring it, you know, very, very directly in terms of making changes to try to lessen my impact, my negative impact on the earth. So, yeah, Atlas bear has just left me thinking about, you know, treating all species well, and the importance of treating all species well. So, I want to pick a new animal for the month. This time I'm going to pick from a different deck. I have so many animal decks, and I want to mix it up and ensure that each animal deck gets to be in the rotation if I can. So this is the Secret Language of Animals by Chip Richards. And this deck is one of the few animal oracle decks I have, aside from actually the Flora and Fauna of Africa, that actually has some keywords on it that I quite like. It has a good guidebook as well. So we will find a new animal for July. And I will mention that I've left some cards out of this deck because it also has some cards that are not animal cards. Like it has a card for each element. So I just put those to one side. An animal for July. It has horrifying glossy cardstock, but it is a great deck. An animal for July. Okay. Cut the card. Dragonfly. Magic, spontaneity, immediacy, and change. This is a good one because I'm going to be seeing lots of dragonflies as I'm canoeing more and more, I hope. So, dragonfly will be the inspiration for July's learning. I'm sure there's lots of species of dragonfly. Dragonfly is a general name, but I will have some things to share about dragonfly after I spend July learning about dragonfly. So that is it for me for my June recap. rambly as always. I will be back again shortly with a video that's a 6-month kind of check-in from my intention setting for 2021. I do want to share about my discovering of Druidry as a path that I am going to be pursuing, and kind of what led me there, as well as some other musings from my having taken the Elements class, from working with the Hoodoo Tarot through the Hoodoo Tarot study group, with just some reading that I've done, kind of where my spiritual path has made some shifts recently. So I wanted to make a video kind of dedicated to that specifically. I'll also be back with some other content that I have yet to define for July, but I do know there's a tag or two that I would like to do, so those will be coming up as well. But the next video will probably be that 6-month update / spiritual shifts conversation that I would like to share with you. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you all again soon. It is a very hot day, so I am going to go jump in some cool water. Hope you're well. Have a good one, and I'll see you again soon.